If you want to make your web development life easy, fast, reusable, I recommend you to use Docker. I've been a web developer for 5 years, and at startups, corporations, on my own projects, I've been using Docker. And before talking about Docker, I should probably give you a little history of why we're using Docker in the first place. What was the common problem that developers used to have? So we can understand why we're using it in the first place. Let's say a developer who just finished writing their code, they have tested it, it works on their local machine. They have deployed it into production environment, so the code reached production, but it doesn't run anymore. It broke the environment. How come? What happened? Well, when we investigate the two things, our local machine doesn't match the production. They're two different things. So this is where we came up with different things of how we can develop different things. Well, different software. And before we start to use Docker, we start to use a virtual machine or VM. And what it allows us to do is making sure that our local machine matches the production. But there are a few things that we didn't like about it. The one thing is when we're setting up a virtual machine is that we have to allocate resources for our project, which means that we need to actually hard code the numbers. So if you have a machine that is not the best in the world, if you have specific requirements, or if you're running on a very, very minimum specs, well, guess what? Right now, if you have 8 gigs of memory, you have to choose how much can you allocate for your specific project. If the project requires minimum of 2 gigs of memory, well, you have to allocate minimum of 2 gigs of memory. And guess what? After you have done that, you still have to run different applications. You still have to run different resources in order to run this specific project. So you can see that your machine will start to overheat, will start to run slow, you won't be able to do any work at all. Now, as the time went by, the Docker came out, and the Docker works a little bit different. The Docker still allocates things on your machine, but the way it allocates, it doesn't ask to hard code your memory, it does it by itself automatically. So when you run your project, if it sees that your project starts to run a little bit slower, it will say, okay, let me allocate 500 more megabytes of memory for your project to make sure that you have enough space. But the way it does it, it doesn't do it for your entire project. It does it for each specific container. Now, what is a container in Docker? Well, now let's talk about Docker itself. Imagine Docker as a ship. And you probably have seen that before, where the Docker will have different containers on top. And inside of those containers, you'll have different products from different companies, let's say like Apple, some bike company, Lenovo, and etc., etc., etc. And all those things, they are changeable. You can remove one specific container for one specific company, and the Docker, that big ship, will still be able to deliver other products to different countries, to different places, wherever it needs to be shipped. And that's exactly how Docker is made in our industry, in software development for web programming. In web programming, what do we need in order to create a website? Well, we need the front end, we need a back end, we need a database. And guess what? 3 of those things, 3 of those parts, you can put them into their own container. And the beauty of that is, let's say right now, for our database, we decide to use MongoDB. And it doesn't matter what version, you can use whatever version you like, but that database of itself right now will be in its own container. And the beauty of that is that if I remove that container right now, if I decide to delete the database from my website, the front end is still working, the back end is still working. I mean, of course, the backend won't be able to save and get any records from database, but it's there, it's working. They're not dependent on each other. And if I decide to replace that container with a different container, let's say Postgres, I can do that, no problem. And guess what? All of this is on your local machine. It's not about production, but it allows you to replicate the production environment. And the beauty of that, by the way, is, let's say right now on your production environment, you do have a specific version of a specific package in a specific container, whatever it might be. You're able to test things out on your local machine to see how is it gonna work. Is it gonna break or is it gonna work? Where is it gonna happen? Once you find your findings and the way you go about them, you're able to choose the right path for your project to make sure that your production doesn't break whenever you deploy new things, whenever you make specific changes, whatever it is. But that's how Docker is used in a professional settings. And as you can see, with the power of Docker, I'm able to do a lot of things on my local machine, and I don't have to break my production environment. And if you're not sure also how to set up Docker, if you're not sure what a Docker container is or how to set it up, I'll be creating a video on that as well. So if you're not subscribed yet, do it now. Now, it is a lot to take in. And as you can see, Docker is not an easy thing, but at the same time, it's very, very powerful. As you'll get into it, as you'll have a little more practice, you'll see that it's going to help you to develop your projects much, much faster, easier, and reusable. To be honest, is that when you create your Docker container once, when you create your Docker project first time, and second time and third time, you'll compare them to each other, and you'll see that they look very, very much the same. In terms of when you created the multiple containers for your database, whenever also it was coming to values of volume, you'll see that they're matching. In fact, you can just copy paste the work you have done previously to your different project. That work is reusable. That's why it's going to be very, very super fast way to set it up. And the one thing about also virtual machine is that whenever you run your project, you'll be sitting there waiting until you do Vagrant app. As soon as you do that Vagrant app command, it's gonna take a couple of minutes for you to run that project. It's gonna take you a while. With Docker, as soon as you do Docker up, bam, done. Your project is running, ready to go. You're ready to hustle and just go to work. So if you were to start working on a project right now, I do recommend for you to using Docker because, well, now we know what the Docker is. We know how it's working. We know the history of what problem it is solving for us. And if you're not sure how to start the project on it, or if you're not sure first how to set up your backend, well, I do have a video on that, and where I give a great explanation where I am setting up using Node.js Feathers framework, where I'm setting up a production-ready RESTful API and creating multiple CRUD systems services where you can take a look into, and I'll leave a link in the description below for you to take a look at. I hope you're getting value. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.